Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Best Practices for Facilitating Support Groups. I'm really excited about today's webinar. I'm Laura Woods. I'm the Manager of Provincial Services for EVA BC, and I'm speaking to you from our EVA BC offices in Vancouver, which we respectfully acknowledge is on the unceded ancestral and traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations, and we thank them for the opportunity to live, play, and work here. So this webinar will be recorded. US participants will not be on camera. Your microphones will be muted. There's going to be opportunities for questions and answers at specific points in the webinar, and it's probably best if you save your questions for then so they don't get lost in the chat. Please note that when you're posting in the chat, you can use the drop-down menu. There's the little blue menu with the drop-down arrow on the right, and you can select either to direct your chat to just the panelists or to all the attendees. So today, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce to you Jennifer Hollinshead, MA. She's the founder and the clinical director of Peak Resilience. And she's been a counselor supporting survivors of violence for the last 15 years. And she supports her team of counselors at Peak Resilience in Vancouver to provide trauma-informed, anti-oppressive, intersectional feminist therapy to thousands of people across the province. She was born in Calgary on Tsuut'ina, Tenaha, and Blackfoot land, and she currently works and raises her family on the stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples in what is colonially referred to as Vancouver, BC. As a white, cisgendered, heterosexual woman, Jennifer's always trying to learn more about unconscious biases, especially ones rooted in white supremacy, colonialism, and exploitive capitalism, and to speak up about oppression in order to be a better ally to people in targeted populations, and to be an ethical mental health service provider. When COVID-19 first hit and Peak Resilience moved their counseling services 100% online, Jennifer and her team rapidly developed multiple free mental health support groups for folks affected by the pandemic shutdown. They learned a lot through that process, and they want to share that collective wisdom with you today. So Jennifer is always excited to harness the flexibility, ingenuity, and resilience of our communities, counselors and clients alike. And on that note, I'm very happy to turn it over to our presenter today. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Laura. And it's an absolute pleasure and honor to be asked to present on group support and kind of everything and anything that goes along with that. And as you said in the introduction, Laura, I've been doing this work for quite a while. My first job after I was a lifeguard was a crisis worker at a domestic violence shelter when I think I was, early 20s. And since then, I just have been consistently learning about and unlearning about what has been harmfully kind of brainwashed into me living in this society. And how we can learn to be different. And so, as Laura said, so just to give you a little bit of background on me, I was very excited to open a practice based on counselors being human beings first and counselors second. So that's why I opened Peak Resilience, and we opened in 2015. And throughout the years, we've been growing a lot. And so to give you a little bit of our COVID story, everyone has their own kind of what happened when the pandemic hit. But we were scaling up into a brand new 12 office space. We were going from 4 offices to 12 offices. And then we moved into our new office space and had our grand opening March 6th, 2020. And then closed down and went 100% remote March 13th, 2020. So that was devastating and very scary. And I'm sure everyone right now attending this has their own, where were you and what was going on in your life when everything changed. So I'm sharing this because I think the spirit of what I want to talk about today is how to run programming and support groups and even individual therapy or other supports during a global pandemic when we don't really know kind of what's going to happen next. We're also in a shared traumatic reality with the folks that we are supporting. And so basically my intention for today is to give a really broad overview of sort of group support 101 and how to figure out what group structure and plan will be the best for you and your agency, so that hopefully by the time that we're done today, you can have kind of a concrete plan or proposal to bring back to your colleagues in your agency to try and scale something up. So I am going to share my screen here. Just give me 1 second. So I have a presentation here. We use Canva. This is what you're witnessing here. Bear with me. Okay. So now I'm just looking in the chat. Okay, good. So Laura's got some instructions there. Great. So basically, it's all about sustainability and the power of connection, which is two things that we are in dire need of right now. And so I am going to go just get right started. So the basic sort of format for today, we're going to just remind ourselves again kind of what the point is in groups and why they can be beneficial, especially in the context of what we're living through right now. And then we'll just do some nuts and bolts, prepping for group, informed consent. I think Laura, let me know if this is correct, but I think Laura emailed all the participants for today just with some attachments, with some templates. I think that's Laura.
I did. I emailed them very last minute today because we realized that anybody who hadn't updated their Zoom recently might not be able to download them from the chat. So now we'll have the ability to put them in the chat. But if they don't show up for you, check your email. I have emailed you 2 templates.
And I saw in the chat as well, I can absolutely send the PowerPoint as well if that's going to be helpful. So let's just get going here. I want to start with a poll because everyone has different feelings about group programming. So I'd like to get a sense what feeling out of all of these comes up for you the most? Nervous, overwhelmed, excited, or confident? So Fiona, I don't know if, okay, there we go. We got a poll. Okay, I'm waiting for some of the votes to come in. A lot of our team members, so we have about 25 counselors on our team. And so when COVID hit, what we did was we rapidly sort of scaled up just sort of basic level mental health support groups. And one of the comments from one of my colleagues was that it felt like an absolute leap of faith because we were doing it right at the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't know what end was up. We thought it would be a 2-week long lockdown. And so it felt like a leap of faith, no idea kind of what's going to happen or what is happening. And so, yeah, a lot of our team was very overwhelmed, I would say. So, Laura, do you know when I can see the results of this poll? The results aren't coming up for me.
I can, if I stop the poll now, I can show the results.
Okay, should we
Are there still answers coming in?
I've got 92% of people have voted. So let's just give another 10 seconds and then I'll end it.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Fiona. And Irene says in the chat, thank you, Irene. I have a mixture of both overwhelmed and confident. That's awesome. So I think, okay, lots of nervous, lots of excited, some overwhelmed, and fewer confidence. And that's kind of what I suspected, because that's how I feel and that's how our team felt. And so you are in absolutely great company. I think too, maybe just in the chat room or in the chat function, you can just note if you've had a great deal of experience, and maybe this is for Irene, because Irene said, I have a mixture of both overwhelmed and confident. And so Irene, if it's okay to single you out in here, what makes people confident? I guess I think that there's probably like a huge amount of collective experience in here. So I'm hoping to get hear like what makes people confident. The people who answered confident, of course. So Irene, is it previous experience that is helping you feel confident? Oh yeah. Built a level of knowledge and therefore feel more capable. And thank you, Irene. And we're also like, that's part of the capacity conversation that we're going to talk about too today, is if you have a ton of experience or if you haven't run a group before, that'll obviously very much contribute to how you're feeling going in. Before we get going into, oh, okay, I'm just looking at Irene in the chat, but my window of tolerance creeps to hyperarousal, which causes me to doubt myself. You're not alone in that. And okay, so we're getting a lot of confidence in the effectiveness of groups and maybe some nervousness and overwhelm around like running them online. So this is so helpful. Thank you, everyone. So what I find fascinating is we try to run groups through Peak Resilience, and we oftentimes find that people are way less game to join a group as opposed to sort of coming in for individual support. It's nerve-wracking. And so, but the multiple studies over a really long period of time have shown that group counseling support is as effective and actually sometimes, quite a few times, more effective than individual support. And I think that's just as valid, I would say, in the stopping the violence world, in terms of people's healing process. And Rhea says, excited and nervous. Excited because I'm always passionate about my group, but I'm nervous because I truly never know how I'm going to be received. And I think, sorry, we have a question in the chat, Laura or Fiona. Maybe you can address that. Rebecca says, do you know why I'm not able to see the comments by others? So, I think you have to, if you're going to put a message in, you have to make sure it says to panelists and attendees. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if Laura would jump in there, but I just wanted to remind everyone that if you want your comment to be seen by everyone attending the training, you can make sure that it's going to panelists and attendees versus if it's just says 2 panelists, it's only going to be viewable by Jennifer, Laura, me, and Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the most profound aspects of why groups can be so transformative is the connection. You know, we can support clients one-on-one as therapists, but they are not going to have the experience of seeing someone else across the room from them or in the Zoom meeting basically articulate the same feelings and experiences they are having. So it really, really allows for normalizing of struggles, people feeling more understood and less alone, or even less pathologized or crazy. A lot of people can feel supported from multiple people in the group as well as the facilitators. And then the cool thing that I find is something that you don't get in individual support is people gain self-efficacy, self-esteem through their ability to support others in the group. So it's really a reciprocal, mutual relationship that sorry, I'm just double checking the chat while I'm presenting here. It's very reciprocal and sort of mutually beneficial. And the other reason, I'm not sure I have to tell anyone this, I'll speak for myself. I'm tapped. I'm exhausted. Our team, even in alternative practice or fee-for-service practice, is exhausted. And that I'm assuming is the case for people in the Stopping the Violence programs and under the umbrella of EVA BC, because this is a very difficult time. And so ideally, there's a benefit to us in providing group support because we can support multiple people at once. And then the unknown benefit when we were scaling up our groups at the beginning of the pandemic was the lack, like isolation as a service provider. And so what we found was it's almost like you have a work buddy that you are providing services with, and that increases connection during this pandemic time where even as colleagues we're not working together. So we found that the group, you know, in terms of our exhaustion levels and our capacity, that it was mutually beneficial in that way too, because we were connecting with colleagues as well as supporting multiple people at once. Yeah. I think too, another great reason for groups is just different perspective, and I guess a different diversity of perspectives. You know, a lot of the time, again, if we're in a one-to-one support situation, we're getting one other person's perspective. And so in the group situation, you're getting a lot of different perspectives and different life experiences and, yeah, just a broader range of reactions and perspectives. And then what I find the most beneficial, I would say, is using a group setting. And I think that this is for the facilitators to model, is facilitators witnessing and articulating the different forces of oppression that people are going through, and I guess normalizing that and making sure that we're externalizing the shame from that. And then we're looking at, and then the facilitators can also note or illuminate ways that people in the group are actually trying to resist certain levels of oppression. And what that can do is increase the personal power that participants feel, but also it helps the facilitators with their compassion satisfaction and feeling like they are addressing and naming the societal forces that are harming their clients. So it can really, that aspect of the power piece, I think is huge. And I got a couple of messages here from Diane Brussel. Thank you so much to the panelists. So group helps make empathy and dissolve shame and isolation in a different way. Studies have shown that group therapy is more effective than one-on-one for survivors of incest. Absolutely. And then Laura's just reminding us if you want your comments to be seen by everyone. So before I go on, I'm just going to, I guess, ask the question, are there other benefits that I'm maybe forgetting or not speaking to that you can brainstorm in the chat? We've talked about reducing shame. One of the things that I'll just wait and see if anyone wants to comment on that, but one of the things that we noticed in running our groups, and we continue to run various different types of groups now, is people during this pandemic have a lot of insecurity around their relationship skills. So looking at building relationships that last long term, thank you, Nicole. It reduces isolation that people are already experiencing. Yeah, this is awesome. Oh, mirror neurons. Thank you, Diane. Good call. Communication skills, safe place for support, modeling of trust and open communication. Absolutely. Yeah, bring a diverse group of people that may not usually mix, and seeing the magic that happens in that, normalizing feelings and reducing self-doubt. I think too, if we're looking at the nature of sort of violence and domestic violence, one of the real kind of hallmarks is isolation and gaslighting. And so that can be a really important part of the group experiences, the witnessing and the sort of fact checking of like, wait a second, am I crazy or what's happening here? And it's powerful when a participant realizes they're not alone in their experiences and feelings. It's so powerful and healing. Thank you so much, everyone, for all of those thoughts. So, like I said today, the hope for today is that that you will have a better idea of what is going to fit for you and your agency. And so let's get started into that. We've all heard of the oxygen mask example, right? Analogy of putting your own mask on first. But the thing that I like to think about absolutely first is, what is our capacity? And so just to give you our capacity example of when we did all these groups at the beginning of COVID, we actually had quite a few counselors come on board, and they didn't have full caseloads yet. And so when COVID hit, our regular sessions went lower, and we had quite a few people with time on their hands and, wanting to do something but not knowing what. And also people on our team, myself included, freaking out because we don't know what's happening. And so our capacity, when we kind of assessed our capacity, we had a lot of people with a lot of time. We really wanted to make a difference in the community. And we wanted to support a lot of people for free or little amount of resources. So that's kind of what led to us making the decision that yes, it was going to be a good fit for us. But basically, it's like, okay, if your agency is already at capacity or more, the question there is ideally like, what do you need to sort of decrease or change to make space for the group facilitation and the prep work for it. Another thing that we're pretty strict on where we work is not doing this work alone. It's hard when people are sick sometimes and when we're short-staffed and we're trying to stretch our resources as much as possible. But I think, and I think my colleagues would agree, there's a benefit to having co-facilitators when you're running groups in person. You know, I'm assuming that people who have facilitated a group here have experienced, you know, someone becoming kind of hyper aroused or you know, upset, and maybe they leave the room. And ideally, that's when the co-facilitator can follow or attend to, you know, if there's a crisis going on. And then the other facilitator can manage the group's reaction and process things and keep the group going. And that is absolutely the exact same thing with online. And oftentimes there's a lot of tech pieces involved that we will talk about. So yeah, capacity, that's sort of one of those kind of a hard conversations and discussions to have on your team, but very useful because the point in running groups is to make this work more connective and more sustainable. So it's not to just add on a group to whatever you're already doing, right? The other thing is what are the needs and the capacities of your clients. So there are different types of groups and group structures and offerings that we're going to talk about. Like we have kind of workshops that are obviously more about teaching and psychoed. So those would be more valuable if you're thinking, you know what, I think that clients are feeling relatively connected, they're feeling relatively supported, and they just need kind of some education to learn more about X, Y, and Z. So that's more of a workshop. But if the main need of your clients maybe is to connect with others or to undo aloneness or shame, I think that's when usually the closed group is the most safe. But again, we're going to go look into all the different types of groups, so stay tuned for that. I also thought about, like, you know, if clients are struggling with getting their basic needs met or getting childcare or whatever it might be, I think it's really important to address those needs either in tandem with the group offering that you're running, or I know that with Stopping the Violence counselors, there's a lot of referrals in the community that can be done to try and help meet those needs at the same time. So not forgetting in our hope to run awesome transformative therapy groups or workshops, that we're not forgetting about just the basic needs and what can allow people to attend or not attend. Yeah. I'm just going to overview the group options. So, open groups in general refer to the fact that it's open registration-wise. So, new people can join at any time. Open-ended means that it also doesn't have an end date. So, so you can have an open group that has a specific time frame. You can have an open group that's just ongoing. There are a whole bunch of different types of open groups. And under these kind of three main areas, like the sky is the limit. Doing some research for today in just looking at what's happening in the world of group therapy and group support right now. It's fascinating, finding equine assisted group therapy and horticultural group therapy and activities based group therapy. Like there's so many fun, unique ways that you can structure groups within these sort of general structures. So closed groups are more like time limited. Once you are in, that is going to be your group. So set group of participants, set time, no one's kind of coming in or going out. And then workshops, like I mentioned, workshops are very much less processing our psychological feelings and more about, just presenting skills and presenting information. Now, thinking about what you have capacity for, it's interesting when you think about all of these options. Does anyone have thoughts, and if you don't mind sharing in the chat, which one of these structures do you think is the easiest for us as counselors? The easiest to prep for, the easiest to facilitate? What would you be wanting to do if you were really tired? Closed group is the easiest. Closed. Okay. Workshops. Amazing. So we are seeing an absolute variety of answers. And so closed groups, because it's a little bit more structured. We've got workshops. We've only had a couple for the open groups or the drop-in groups. So that's interesting. Okay. So all of these structures have pros and cons, as I'm assuming everyone here is very well aware. I would echo that, a closed group feels nice and cozy and, maybe has some nerves and some jitters at the beginning, but then you can settle in and the people and who's going to be there every week. And, a lot of people kind of gravitate to that being the easiest or the safest. But, there's a lot of deep reactions that can happen in closed groups, especially processing and stuff. And that's actually, that's the great work that we do, but it's intense sometimes to run a closed group, right? And then to run workshops, I think that's, for some people running a workshop would be, like Jerry Seinfeld says his joke of, most people would rather be, or their biggest fear is public speaking. And so people would rather be in the coffin than doing the eulogy. And so sometimes workshops would be the absolute just devil for some people. But then for other people, it's really an opportunity to have a diversity of, I don't really want to be on right now emotionally. And so running a workshop feels like different for me. And so workshops can also be a good way of diversifying the energy that you have to tap into at work. But yeah, everyone has different feelings about it. I think that's fascinating. So let's look at some pros and cons, just to wrap our heads around this. So open groups, the pros are obviously that they're pretty flexible, and that because they're open, there is change. And so when we're facilitating an open group, a lot of the times we're modeling and helping people understand changing dynamics. And then another pro is it's easy. Like it just, do you want to come? You can come. And so there's a lot of pros. What are the other pros for open groups, do you think? Another thing that I mentioned on the slide too is that if you have a full group and then you lose a few people, you can make sure that the group continues, as opposed to potentially like dying out. So that's one benefit. Participants don't feel pressured to attend all sessions. Yes. And very true, Karen. Thank you for that. It feels less scary for folks if they aren't ready to go in depth. Yeah, it's more of a choose your own adventure. And easy to organize on our end. Absolutely. So obviously then pros and cons. A con could be it's not as deep or safe as a closed group, and can be unpredictable or maybe less kind of safe feeling. What are some other cons, do you think, of an open group? Things that could maybe not go well, or things that could potentially be drawbacks? I like what Kristen said. Flexibility depending on your participants' needs and wants. Do we want to go for a forest walk today? Yeah. Less commitment for participants, more accessible. Yeah, like Michael, thank you for that. And I think too, just to speak to what, oh, sorry, that's Michelle. Sorry, Michelle, to what she was saying here about sometimes it's less commitment for participants and more accessible. Like in this pandemic, I don't know a lot of people who have the capacity or the ability to commit to something for a certain number of weeks and to come at the same time and have a confidential space to attend a session in. And so I think, commitment, very hard. Oh, and I'm glad that Nicole and Celine brought this up in small communities. Yes, absolutely. That is a drawback for sure. Interconnected relationships. Yeah. Another con, Irene, yep, good call. More screening and ongoing documentation as people come in. Absolutely. So as you can see, there's benefits and risks to open groups that, may make you want to choose it or not choose it. Closed groups, pros and cons. We've talked about, you kind of know what you're going into. After the first session, you know what you're going into. There's predictability. There's usually a structured framework and purpose and a time frame. And there's, the beauty of a closed group is that you get to watch as people develop and kind of sink into building more intimate connections with one another. It's awesome. And it also allows participants to have a shared common experience from start to finish. So they're in it together. And it's not, I came in week 1, you came in week 7. We have totally different experiences. They all have a shared common experience. And then, I guess cons, tougher to access. One of the cons that I think is interesting is without the kind of insertion of new folks every once in a while, sometimes what can happen is like an over-identification and a group think, if it's not facilitated in the right way. And then Yeah, and then, the benefit of open groups is the diversity, and so that could be potentially a con here, is that we're lacking the range. Lack of range, but it really lets you kind of go deeper into topics. And workshops, pros and cons. Workshops, pros, you don't have to do a lot of intake work and registration. It's usually like people sign up, you don't have to kind of assess them in any way. And it can be distinct and time limited. Like you can just do a one-off workshop. It could be a series, but it could just be something that you create and pull off as it's needed. So there can be flexibility with it. And obviously with workshops, it's more about kind of building knowledge and skills and helping them get information and that sort of thing. Oh, can you talk a little bit more about what groupthink can look like? Yes, I can. So I'm trying to think of an example. But basically, I'm thinking of a group that I ran at one point in my career, closed group, for survivors of intimate partner violence, and it was like a fantasy group. At the beginning, it was just like everyone's connecting with one another. Everyone is sharing. People are being vulnerable. I thought it was like a unicorn group experience, basically. And then kind of session 3 to 8, we started to notice, oh, wait a second. People are not challenging one another as much. People are starting to agree with one another without any extra feedback to add in to differentiate things. So it gradually started, and then by the end, can you speak? Over-identification may be a hindrance. Okay. So in my experience with the group that was developing groupthink, people were over-identifying in the group, which was taking their own healing and their own values and their own situation and putting it on a bit of a back burner. So it was almost a phenomenon of, it's so hard to describe when it happens so subtly. But basically, I want to belong and be a part of this group so much that my own goals and my own values and my own dreams are a little bit less important for me because I'm just so excited about participating in this group. So I don't know if I'm doing a great job explaining groupthink and why it would be a hindrance to, fawn response. Absolutely, Sheila, is that can be a part of the groupthink is, if people are having a fawn response being, I just want to have no conflict and being one of us. And that is important. But I think it's just important to keep an eye on it. Yeah. Okay, so other, obviously, workshop cons. If you don't have the material, the prep time can be a lot. And you can potentially get less engagement and less opportunities for people to make the connections on what you're presenting and how it will actually work in their life. Pros and cons of workshops as well. So, it's been 45 minutes and it's the afternoon on a Thursday in year 2 of the pandemic. So let's take a break. We'll come back at 5 minutes to, and so take 10 minutes and do whatever you need to do, and we will be back and ready to jump in. I just want to make sure people stretch, grab a drink, go to the bathroom, enjoy. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. Good. Perfect. Okay, well, 1:55. Hope everyone had a little rest. Now we can get started again. So this is where I'm hoping to get some thoughts about what client problems we might be trying to sort of address or solve the most. So, one of the things that we brainstormed at our practice was, okay, people are panicking. A lot of people lost their jobs right away. A lot of people's mental health was plummeting. And a lot of those people, weren't used to mental health services. They were not engaged previously to mental health services, and so one of the problems that we were trying to address when we scaled up our COVID support groups was sort of a bit of stunnedness, and helping people just get their feet on the ground again. And build like the basic level coping strategies, as well as we were trying to solve isolation, and we were trying to, increase connection for people when they were just sort of experiencing crisis, but not supposed to be with anyone at the same time. Okay. So let's just brainstorm some problems that we might want to be addressing. So isolation groups really support people experiencing isolation. We might want to be skill building. We might want to decrease shame. We might want to increase engagement. So one of the things I was thinking about a workshop, for example, is it's not as scary for people to come to a workshop, right? So a workshop might be a great way to engage folks with your services who might be a little bit too intimidated to actually access your actual services. So that could be a problem that you're trying to solve. More with closed, time-limited groups, maybe processing past trauma, or are you looking at kind of future dreaming and goal setting? Are you helping people to communicate, like we said? Are we helping people build relationships and build a support network? The other thing I think too is that group counseling or group support can be really motivating for people, to see other people doing the work, to see other people struggling with the same thing. And obviously, the what's in it for us, I think, the main thing being a decrease in hours for us to support more people. And Irene says some folks find it less intimidating to access groups before they start or think about one-on-one counseling. Absolutely. Some people, that's so true, Irene. We find in our practice anyways that the majority of people are coming to us for individual counseling, and then when we talk about groups, they're just like, no, that's too scary. But that's so true, is that maybe attending a group or a workshop or a drop-in group is less intimidating. Yeah, that's so true. Okay. Another thing to think about, which I find my team and I all find tough, is kind of differentiating the population, or who is this group for? And is there anyone who would not be a good fit for the group, and why would that be? So can anyone give me an example, maybe in the chat, of a group that you ran, maybe, and the clients that you thought would not be a good fit for that group? So I'm thinking of an example where maybe an agency is running a drop-in mental health support group, and the folks attending that group are not hooked up with individual support or any other supports. We might want to look at screening out for people with really severe mental health struggles. Another thing we talked about, and I think this is, high trauma and people with aggressive tendencies. Absolutely. I think one of the things we've talked about is safety concerns. And this is just like the biggest catch-22, especially for stopping the violence groups, right? I'll give you an example of, we had a group where one of the participants was living in an active domestic violent situation, and she couldn't attend the group sometimes, and so that was where we had to do a lot of follow-up with her. And it wasn't, again, so I want to differentiate, she was actually a good fit for the group, but we had to do extra work and follow-up with her. Assertiveness group, and a couple clients were in unsafe relationships, so we had to discuss safety around assertiveness. Absolutely. Like, you have to kind of have disclaimers. Absolutely. So it's a tough process, because I think myself, I'm just like, everyone can come, and I don't feel good about, excluding anyone, but that is part of the process in creating a container and creating, a situation where you're kind of setting yourself up, and you're setting the rest of the participants up for a safer experience. And the other thing that we had to try to remember was, like, what's our niche? What's our target? We cannot support everyone all at once. So, okay, maybe we feel very sad and disappointed that we're going to screen out and exclude people with really more severe mental health. But we also know that the folks with really severe mental health are often connected to other services, and folks with moderate to mild don't fit the bar for those other services. So we try to kind of have that, who's a good fit for the group and who's not, based on the overarching kind of support structure in our community as well, trying to figure out, who's not really being supported and how can we make a group for them. So that's kind of what we try to do. And then Sarah says, unfortunately, we had to ask a child protection social worker who was experiencing domestic violence to not partake in a group, as some other women who were in the group had child protection services involved in their cases. Ugh. And that, to me, Sarah, I don't know what your thoughts are, but that to me is just the perfect textbook example of systems oppressing people, right? This lovely human being experiencing domestic violence, and who's also being potentially oppressed by their job, and then their job is preventing them from getting services. Yeah, it's just the layers on that. Active addictions make it difficult for the client to attend and thrive. Thank you, Linda. I think that is also dependent on whatever you're running, right? So I know for some of the groups that we have in Vancouver, there's groups where there is active addiction and someone is also motivated to attend. And so there's wiggle room, but also, I guess, critical thought processes along, okay, how do we know it's going to be safe? If someone does have an active addiction, what would make it safer for them to attend group, and what would make it safer for the other people in the group? And maybe it can be safe enough, and maybe it can't. That's fine too. Literacy or language barriers for a group that has lots of written and reading components. Daycare issues. Moms on Zoom with too many distractions may not be able to be online with a heavy emotional investment, 100%. I think that's absolutely true. And that's where we have to figure out what our community can do and what they can't do before we schedule things, before we figure out what groups we're going to do. Ideally, we're going to engage the community. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, individuals without technology to support Zoom meetings or complete online content. Absolutely, that's a huge barrier. Yeah. And so here's the other thing that we haven't done yet. We didn't do it last year just because it was too strict. But what we could have potentially the opportunity for in the summer and beyond, kind of, is outdoor groups. And that's something that we've like potentially thought about. And I think someone mentioned, going for a forest walk and doing other things outside as a group. Yeah, we offer many times based on enrollment needs over a period of time to make them more accessible so each group can be attended over time. Awesome, Irene. And yes, Rebecca, we're going to be getting into group confidentiality for sure. To be determined or to be continued. Before we get into any the confidentiality stuff, this should be a team event. Running groups can absolutely take a lot of workload and a lot of burden off of all of those individual sessions, but it's still a lot of work. So we always talk about trying to think this through from a, if I had to run this group forever, sustainability perspective, how would I have to run it so that I could do that? So ideally, you can have some admin support. Hopefully, maybe you even have kind of a volunteer program or a peer support program. Maybe it would be appropriate, depending on the group that you're running, to have kind of a peer support worker in there. This is really good experience for practicum students and practicum counselors because they can kind of witness how we're facilitating. It's also great if you have the capacity to have 2 counselors or facilitators and a student. That's even better. And then we also really recommend who do you go to when the poop hits the fan? Who is your consultant, your supervisor? Who can you go to when things are pretty complex and when you really, really have kind of no ideas on what to do next? It's really important to have someone who you trust, someone who is very experienced in what you're doing as a support. And then finding out the details. I love that Irene spoke to this already, right? Like scheduling it. When is it? Where is it? How long is it? How many people? Offering different offerings is a great way to make it more accessible, and it's also tougher, right? Because you're having more offerings. And then the other thing is, with our groups, because we want our main goals were flexibility and connectivity, so connecting our participants to one another, reducing isolation. When we were scaling our COVID groups, and at one point we had, I think, 8 groups of 10 people, we talked about the fact that how do you prepare content when the world is upside down? No one knows what's happening. No one knows what's going to happen. And so what we decided in terms of, materials and content and what we should be doing, we decided to be very flexible and adapt. And so I'm going to go through kind of the structure that we used soon. So, oh, and Sarah, yes, in some of your groups, if you can bring an elder in, that is even better. And looking at, for Tina, for the last comment, we have been able to offer that occasional person who doesn't have at-home tech, they can use a private room at our space to do groups, if that helps anyone. That's amazing, Tina. Yes, I think that's such a great example of being responsive and flexible. And that's actually what we're doing at our clinic as well, where we have a flexible work from home. All of our counselors do whatever they feel comfortable with. So we have counselors who are 100% work from home still, which is fine, absolutely. And we have clients who don't have a safe space come to our office. We set them up, get them cozy, and then they Zoom their counselor at home. So yeah, that's a great idea. Also a call-in only option, yes. Absolutely, who don't own a computer or don't want to be on camera. That's another thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later in kind of conjunction with the confidentiality piece, is the camera issue. It's a thing. So we're going to talk about that in more depth. Okay. So I think, everyone here would most likely agree that, as service providers, our first rule is do no harm. And so we need to really think about safety first when we're providing care in any way. And obviously this is no exception. So we have, at our practice, we have informed consent for all of our different services. So we have our regular informed consent for kind of individual counseling services. We have an informed consent for our relationship counseling sessions, and our family sessions. And then we have an informed consent for our group sessions. And I've given out, you've been emailed a group informed consent template that's pretty bare bones. I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail soon. We're also going to talk about the intake information that you need and the process that you might have to go through depending on your agency, depending on the group that you're running, all of that. We're going to talk about like co-creating group guidelines and what that can look like. And then I think it's really important to, in the informed consent process and in the group guidelines process, we normalize and talk about and front load the fact that we are going to have problems. We are going to have conflicts at some point, and that those conflicts and breaches and struggles, that this is how we're going to work through them, and that actually those are an opportunity to grow. And so hopefully, part of the informed consent and the guidelines process is talking about what happens when the, hits the fan. So that can really help front load folks. The other thing, I found an amazing resource, I thought. I've run various different process groups and addiction groups and psychoed groups over the years, and I always knew in my bones how important it was to be on the same page with my co-facilitator, especially in a process group where, we're processing emotions and I'm helping people make connections, and I just need to look at my co-facilitator and we can kind of like know what we're thinking. And what would happen when I was like not on the same page with my co-facilitator, and how that translated to client support. So if you're interested, there's a cool book called The Art of Co-Leader Attunement. So I highly recommend looking that up. Okay. So I have mixed feelings about informed consent and absolutely would love any thoughts in the chat here. The way that we have our informed consent documents, I always frame it like this. They're meant to be reference documents. They're not meant to be, looked through in real time, because we like to have everything and anything that someone might need to know in our informed consent. So our informed consents usually look pretty long. I think our regular one, that's our kind of regular clinic practice one, is like 11 pages. Because we go through, and then our group one is, I think, I sent it out, I don't know how many pages it is, but we try to have this be a document that, okay, maybe if you don't want to read through it, you don't have time, you're not interested, that's fine. We are developing our informed consent documents for our most anxious clients, for our clients who need the most amount of information to feel safe enough. And then they might have questions on top of that information, which is great. So the I guess pro and con to having a longer informed consent is that people can just like throw it out. So what we try and do is we have like the reference document with everything people need to know about how we communicate, confidentiality, everything and anything. And then we're also going to revisit the important parts of that repeatedly and as needed, right? So we can say, oh yeah, in our informed consent document, we talk about texting because we actually don't text because of this and this and this reason. And so, yeah, just a reminder. So that's an example of how we use our informed consent. I know other people and other agencies have brief informed consent, which might be more appropriate for people who aren't too fussed, aren't too worried about it, maybe more appropriate for youth clients or clients who would get overwhelmed by a lot of reading, or clients with English as a second language or that sort of thing. So pros and cons. So what we go through in the template that I sent out is just in plain language. What is this group about? What are we doing? What's the purpose? And confidentiality. So what stays or what's said in group stays in group. I think one of the things that we say, there's so many, if anyone has a good saying, share it in the chat. But I think one of the things we say is take what you learned, leave what you heard, leave the experiences and take the learning. Perfect, Michelle. There's a lot of those different sayings. Learning. Awesome. And attendance. So, we talk about like why it's important to attend the group and like how that creates safety. We're kind of explaining why we want these things, why it's important to be engaged in your participation and what that actually looks like. If you're a more quiet person, what that looks like. If you're a more talkative person, what that looks like. We talk about dual relationships and kind of how to manage relationships with participants. So we say stuff like, ideally you're not, spending time with people outside of the group. Then we talk about like terminating group, and if you want to leave the group, what that process will be like, and obviously how to give feedback and kind of an accountability structure of in our form, kind of where they can give feedback if they don't feel like they can give it to the group facilitators. Yes, and Tina, giving confidentiality beforehand rather than at the first group gives some lead time for people to get to reading it and then do highlights at the first group? Absolutely. So our process, and I didn't want to get too much in the nitty gritty because I realize that everyone's like systems and tech is different. But our process is we use the Jane app, which is very popular across Canada now and mainly in BC. They're based in Vancouver, so we love them. So we use that for our clinic management and like booking and stuff. So when we have a drop-in group, we can literally create a group on our online booking calendar and then link to it that people can book in. And then through that Jane app process, when they book into the group, they're then prompted to fill out a group intake form. So then we have people who have registered for the group, filled out the group intake form. Then we have our counselors look over the group intake form, just see if there's any red flags or safety concerns. And that's how we did our screening. And so then if there were red flags or safety concerns, our counselor would follow up with that person just to sort of consult. And then thank you for staying with me here. This is a long drawn out process. But then when they registered on Jane, they filled out their intake form, we would be notified that they're in the system and that they've registered. And the facilitator would then send them an email just saying, thanks so much for registering. We're really looking forward to meeting you. Here's a link to our group informed consent process or our group informed consent form. If you can read it over and let me know if you have any questions, we're going to go over it in the first group, that sort of thing. So that was our kind of the way that registration played out for us. It's going to be different depending on what tech you have or don't have. So, but yes, absolutely. Sending them the confidentiality, the informed consent beforehand is absolutely best practice. And we do it for all of our individual sessions, all of our group sessions, all of our relationship sessions. They get that email with the informed consent and with other things like directions and all the other kind of logistics in that one email. Okay. I think we're going to get more into the nitty-gritties of informed consent and guidelines, but I'm just going to take right now to just go over high level. So we'll keep going. One of the things we found, so we decided, I'm going to actually go to explain the group that we did. So, and then I'm going to go back and talk about why we did screening and what that looked like. So whatever it was last April, a year ago, we came together as a team and we brainstormed what our capacity was and what the needs were of our community. And this is kind of what we came up with. So we came up with, okay, ideally there's closed groups, but we have no idea if people can attend a closed group. We have no idea if the attendance is going to be consistent and we have no idea the capacity and who's going to want to come and if we're going to have a wait list. And so we're going to say it's closed, but then when we needed to make adjustments, and again, this was a lot more flexible than I think it normally would be because it was right at the beginning of a pandemic. But we said to our group participants, okay, this is who we're starting with. If at any point we lose group members or people can't attend anymore, how do people in here feel about maybe bringing on a couple of new folks into our group? Does that feel okay? How does that feel? And so that's why we called it a semi-open. And then we also called it an open-ended group because we weren't sure how long people would need support for. We weren't sure how long the pandemic would be for. And so what we did was we really leveraged our relationships with the participants and we used their feedback to guide us. And then the model for the group was pretty much the least work we could do as prep, because we just wanted to be flexible. We just wanted to get it up and running. And our main goals were to connect people and to have people be connected to a mental health team. And so basically the way we structured it was it's a little bit process, a little bit psychoed, definitely trauma informed, and definitely coming through from an intersectional feminist lens. But as you can see, this is quite loosey-goosey. So the structure that we came up with was just, okay, let's help them understand how to check in. So we'll have the counselors check in and do the modeling for that and talk about getting in touch with emotions. We just do a check-in, and that usually takes a lot longer than you think it's going to take. From that check-in, the facilitators pulled out themes from the check-in and then basically gave a menu to our folks on, okay, it sounds like this theme came up and this is a struggle. What do people want to focus on today? And then they even did like a little poll to engage people. So do you want this topic or this topic or this topic? And they could count, and then they could make time for each one proportionally to who wants to talk about it. So, and then at the end, maybe the counselors have added in some pretty basic level coping ideas and tools and strategies, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it is. Then after we've done like a kind of mini learning as well as talking about how people are feeling, then we do a checkout and kind of what their intentions are for the week. So pretty simple, and pretty easy as a counselor to kind of roll in and be able to facilitate that with not a lot of like extra work. We had an average of 10, give or take, in each group. I put 1.25 hours. It actually ended up being more like an hour and a half. One of the main takeaways that we had when we first started doing online groups is we thought that people just might not be as engaged as in person, or the conversation might not flow as well. And that did not happen. I mean, it happened with some groups, of course, if there were dynamics that way, but people like to talk. And so we thought, oh, maybe we're going to just have a shorter group, but that wasn't the case. So usually it ended up being at least an hour and a half. And I think a lot of our facilitators kind of wished that they had 2 hours. And then, like I said, in terms of our transparency regarding our group plans, when we started our group, we were transparent that it was a response. And so as we were running them, we were going to be responding to what the participants were wanting, which was great, but also that meant we weren't giving people certainties. And so it was like, okay, we're trying to be trauma informed. We're also trying to be flexible. And so we really just kept the dialogue between the participants and the facilitators going. And then the facilitators would come to me and say, you know what, I think we want 4 weeks more, and then we'll reevaluate. And so we just kept doing that. And I think we ran groups for probably about 3 months, 2 months maybe. And we did that with having 2 counselors or facilitators and admin support on the other end, kind of making sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So the 2 facilitators doing the heavy clinical lifting, and the admin support doing all the tech and that sort of thing. So the reason I wanted to just give you the example of the structure of the groups that we run really quickly is we wanted to screen because we knew that we were playing it pretty fast and loose, to say the least. We knew that we weren't sure how this was going to go. And we also knew that there wasn't a lot of prep work involved for the counselors. So we decided that to just add that extra level of safety, we decided to do a screening call first. So with each client, and this is what took a lot of time, but like I said at the beginning, we had the capacity for it. So we did screen each person. After a while, we moved towards the system where they filled out the intake form, the counselor reviewed the intake form, looked for red flags, and would only consult and reach out to the client if there was any sort of safety concerns or things that we weren't sure about. But at the beginning, we did a full screen, 10, 20 minute, 30-minute screen for every single person. So this resulted in us being able to ensure a little bit more buy-in and safety before they come into a group. We could explain it. We could say exactly what the format's going to be, tell them how many folks are going to be in there, talk about confidentiality, and if they know someone in group, here are their options, and talking a little bit about group guidelines. And as you're having this conversation, you're also assessing for any barriers to safety, any things that would make them not the right fit for this particular group. So we actually had a couple of those scenarios where someone signs up for a group and they're not actually the best fit for the group. And so that's where this screen can be so supportive. It can be just a free way to connect with someone who was interested and motivated enough to sign up for a group, and maybe for whatever reason they're not the perfect fit for the group. So for example, one person had some pretty severe psychosis, and so we felt like, based on the population of folks that were in the group and the way that we were structuring the group and the other resources that we could refer this person to, that's why we decided, you know what, we're going to refer you to some more appropriate services and say that this isn't the best group for you, just because it's not going to serve your needs. So you can kind of do that in a way that's supportive, as opposed to like gatekeeping or anything like that. And then the other thing too that we were really excited about in terms of the screening is that if they did have, because I mean, we were absolutely have people in our groups who have suicidal ideation and self-harming and other safety concerns. And so that's when we talked about, okay, like maybe we can come up with a bit of a safety plan, because, in group, it can be a great support and it can sometimes be stressful because it's, stirring things up for you. So let's talk about having a safety plan outside a group and what that looks like. Maybe it's individual counseling, maybe it's peer support, whatever that could look like. Also, it's an opportunity to answer any questions they have. And what we find when we kind of transitioned away from doing screening for sure for everyone, we did find that the attrition or the attendance did drop if we weren't reaching out to every single client. So that was like a very, I'm just giving you the sense of thinking about all the pros and cons, thinking about our capacity, thinking about the client's needs, and really picking and choosing what we're doing based on all of those aspects. Just anything coming up for folks. I'm just going to give some time. Any questions that anyone would like to maybe put in the chat. Just going to give a bit of a pause. See if anyone's percolating any questions. Because I'm getting sick of the sound of my own voice. Okay. So, okay, dual relationship management within the groups. Yes, Nicole, I would love to talk about that. Do you have a specific question that we can speak to? Because I think we've talked about previously in the chat, we talked about more rural situations, or even in a community like Vancouver, if you're doing a really niche group for a really niche community, very common to see someone you know. So there's the piece around I've come into a group and I know someone that's my neighbor. That's a great point, Nicole, is making that a part of the screening process and talking about, because obviously we can't, prevent someone from coming in and knowing someone, but we can talk a little bit about what the options could be if that were to happen. So one option is that, would we be asking with those with dual relationships to enter into the program at a later date? Ideally, absolutely. Sometimes that's more doable than other times. So I'm thinking about small communities. I'm thinking about, just barriers to service. And so I think it's important to talk through what dual relationships can look like in the group scenario and outside of the group scenario, and help people understand how that can play out. So, and that's different for each different relationship and each different scenario. So usually I just discourage it. And if there's capacity to not have that, and you do this group, absolutely 100%, that's the goal. But if that's not possible, then maybe a really in-depth conversation with both of those folks about the risks and benefits, and if it's going to be a fit for them, and maybe if the risks would actually outweigh the benefits, what could be an alternative route to that. So I don't like to say like never, because there's always that rule of no, we're never allowing it, then we'll harm someone where that will be appropriate. So it's like, okay, goal is to not have dual relationships in the group. If there has to be a dual relationship that maybe is not super tight, like they're not partners, or I'm thinking of like an acquaintance or a neighbor, then you can talk through with them, okay, there's no other, options here. And so, how are we going to manage this? Now, Sarah's saying, I'm thinking about the previous groups delivered, and the dual relationships were only identified when the group started. The alternative was one person was able to have one-on-one counseling and the other was able to attend group. So that is, I think, best case scenario. I think worst case scenario is that, one person has to wait for services or not have services. And so yeah, I think just to, kind of comment on what Sarah and Nicole are sharing, absolutely, this can be a part of your screening process and informed consent process, and saying things like, here's why we don't have two partners attend a group, or here's why we don't have sisters, or whatever, and really articulating that for them. Awesome questions. So this is going to be different. Oh, Tina. Okay. I thought you meant dual relationships with one of the facilitators, especially in small towns. It may be the only service for people. Yeah. Their dual relationships, needless to say, are a loaded topic and can happen all the time, anywhere and everywhere. And so, yeah, I think ideally minimize. If there's no ability to minimize, engage in kind of an informed consent process around that, talking about the pros and cons, the risks and benefits. And then talking through, okay, when would we know that this might not be working? And then what would we do at that point? Coming up with a bit of a contingency plan if you're wanting to risk trying a kind of a weak dual relationship. I think it's there are certain circumstances where it's doable. How do you identify that as part of the screening without disclosing? You can't. You literally can't. Thank you, Alicia. You cannot know who's in the group until people can see each other in the group, right? Okay, Afsoon has got to leave. All good. Yes. Okay. So thank you, Nicole, keeping me on track. So there's dual relationships where people know one another outside of the group already in their own lives, and then that brings a dynamic to the group. There's also dual relationships. I don't think it's referred to as dual relationships, actually. I think it's more sort of side relationships, and when participants themselves then start having various types of relationships outside of group. So group attendees should avoid building a relationship outside of the group. So the conversations that we have, or that I've had with folks about this, is along the lines of, I do not want to prevent anyone from making friends here and from having and building amazing relationships. And that being said, if, for example, we're doing a closed group where this is group therapy, we are starting with the same people, we're ideally ending with the same people, we're going through a process together. Ideally, in that scenario, you're going to minimize the amount of relationship building on the side that you're doing outside of group, because that dynamic can then impact your therapeutic experience. So that's like, if we're talking about a closed group, I'm going to talk about side relationships and dual relationships a bit differently than if it's a drop-in group or if it's a workshop, right? So if it's a workshop, I might be encouraging people to connect with one another, peer support, reduce isolation. Absolutely, potentially. But if it's a closed group, I might want to control for that and encourage people to reach out to one another outside of the group after, if both people consent. So kind of saying, if you want to be friends and have kind of extra contact outside, let's really honor our group therapy and then have that as an option for after. Okay, so Linda, dual relationships in small towns and in the interpersonal violence group we facilitated, both women stayed and respected the confidentiality, etc., and it worked out well for them. Awesome. Thank you, Linda, for that chip in there. Okay. Nicole had a follow-up question to Linda. How? Why and the pros and cons of that? And so maybe Linda can expand on that. It's so hard. We're running this as a webinar because it's recorded and we're really trying to engage people in the text, but yeah, it'd be nice to have a conversation. Yeah, Sheila, exactly. Encouraging to wait until the group is completed to connect. Any chance you can get the recordings? Absolutely. Laura, I think the recording is going to be provided after. See if Laura wants to chip in about that. Laura, are you there? Will this recording be available?
I am here, and yes, the recording will be available and we'll upload it to our website.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Linda, thank you for that clarification. This is so helpful. So one of the things that helped this be possible is because they had a safe place to go. And it was extremely critical for both of them, and they were both grateful. And it sounds like, I guess, there was a lot of buy-in, it sounds like, from them to make it work. And the ability to navigate that sounded like they were able to do that. Thank you, Linda. So getting the word out about whatever group support situation you're doing is always, it can either be super simple and the group fills up right away and it's like, how did that happen? And that was our experience with the first kind of round of COVID mental health groups we ran. I think people were just like, I need something. And so it was really not hard at all to fill those groups. And then we've run other groups where we market them for 4 months and we get like 3 people sign up. So it's very varied. And I would say, so the timeline for us to ramp up our like drop-in COVID mental health support groups, that was about a 1-month timeline from when we first sort of had the thought of it to, articulating all the details, articulating who's it for and not for, all of the things and the details that we've gone over. You have to figure it all out. And so that took us a couple of weeks with our team to go through, well, what are the client needs? What is our capacity? How are we going to do this? And then kind of a week of getting the content organized and getting, for us, what we did was we just, anytime we were doing something new, is we just create a blog post, because that's the easiest way for us to post a link to some information. But then also posting it in other parts of your website and making sure that, it's posted to the relevant people. The other thing that we did was we emailed and we reached out to anyone and everyone in this community who has a wait list for counseling services, or we have a connection with the restaurant industry, and so a lot of their people who got laid off right at the beginning just had no benefits, no ability to access private counseling or any counseling. And so, just reaching out to your community to say what you're doing takes a while. And then I think it's important to sort of suss out, is this offering for your existing community only? Or is it to potentially bring new folks in, or maybe both? So for our groups that we scaled up and ran pretty quickly, it was for both. Right now, we're thinking of, because unfortunately we have a wait list, 'tis the time. So right now we're actually thinking about reaching out to the folks on our wait list to specifically ask them, hey, would you want to attend a group, and what would that look like, and when could you come? Just to see if there is an interest, and then we can create a specific group for our waitlist folks. So that's an example of like figuring out who you're targeting it towards. The other thing to at least just have a rough plan is just, what is your kind of word of mouth marketing plan? So for example, okay, we now have these groups. We want to make sure that we're emailing everyone on our team to ask them, when appropriate, to tell their clients about it in sessions, so that they can have like meaningful therapeutic conversations on, would a group be helpful for you? Because we have one. Would it not be? And that's a really a great way of filling the groups, because then you're really having an extra pair of eyes assess the person and get their readiness and get their buy-in. And so a word of mouth marketing plan. Okay, we're telling our network, we're telling all of our clients. How are we telling them? And then if you're doing a print plan and you're putting flyers at different places or putting posters up, or what does that look like? And what does a online marketing plan look like? And it's funny, depending on what you're running, there are so many factors that make it either easy to fill or not, or tough to fill. So what we also try to do when people join our groups is we try and monitor how they heard about the group and how they join, just so that we can understand like what is the most useful ways of getting the word out for future groups. And surprise, surprise, it's usually word of mouth is the number one way that people will take the risk to attend a group. Okay. Yeah, and so I think this is, I spoke briefly about the group session structure that we chose based on the goals that we had. And so this is really what we tried to do with each session. So we tried, as counselors and facilitators, we tried to remember that it's not our job to perform. It's just our job to be the ones that make the connections. We're not here to just solve everyone's problems and give them the information they don't have. Our job is to respond to what they're bringing and to be relational. And so we tried to consistently remind ourselves of that, because I don't know about anyone out there, but there's a lot of pressure, and I think even more so with the pandemic, to bring relief as a counselor or as a mental health support worker or stopping the violence worker. Like I feel it anyways. I feel more pressure because there is so much suffering right now that I need to bring something magical. And really we tried to remind ourselves that feeling of I got to bring something here is actually going to really take away from you facilitating the group. I mean, a little bit of nerves, a little bit of energy is great. But if you're feeling like you have to prepare so much and that, you can't get anything wrong and there's some perfection, that's actually like exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do. So we really tried to ground ourselves before each group and remind ourselves, like, what is the actual purpose here? The purpose is connection. The purpose is not to get into solutions or problem solving or that sort of thing. Any questions, comments? Mindful of the time. I think we're due for a bit of another break. So Michelle, yes, I've experienced this, too much time spent preparing and not enough time spent preparing for facilitation and helping people process and make connections. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. So, okay, I want to make space for a break because it's the afternoon and we're sitting in front of a screen all day long, people. So why don't we take another break? Let's just do a 7-minute break until 3 p.m. If that's okay, and you can stretch and maybe get some fresh air, and we'll come back right at 3 p.m. Okay, let's get back into it. So I mean, this is just the very sort of easy peasy group structure that we created for our drop-in groups. We also had a follow-up. And welcome back. Thanks, Laura. We also provide a follow-up after each of our group, and this was number one because we wanted to shy away from talking about solutions, and we wanted to focus more on connections and emotions in the group. And so our follow-up was all of the like psycho ed stuff that we thought would be helpful, but that we didn't want to use precious group time for. So we would, send resources, podcasts, whatever. And then we would also follow up specifically with participants if there were any safety concerns. So maybe just give you an example of that happening. So I think with the example of one of our group participants living in a domestic violence situation, there was a kind of a fight that was brewing while she was in a group, and this is another piece of the confidentiality thing that we'll talk about. But basically, it was almost like there was a domestic violence situation playing out during the group. And so not only did it wasn't super severe, but you could tell that there was a lot of like contempt and hostility, and then they ended the call. And so we had to, help folks process that and make connections for what that means for them, and help all the other people in the Zoom room process that, while the other counselor was following up. And she wasn't able to get through right away, I think because, they were busy. But she got through at a later time, and we figured out a plan with that client, and that's another story. But so that was an example, and we've had other kind of, just to jump in on the confidentiality piece. One of the things that we would notice that is different in virtual than in in-person groups was there would oftentimes just be like very casual breaches, like just being on a group, and then in one of the screens that one of the participants, you see their roommate walk by in the background, and they're not wearing headphones, and so you're like, okay, well, no, we have to address the fact that, as we stated, you have to be in a place where no one else can hear. This is a confidential space. Ideally, you can use headphones as well. And so that was an example of just like an instant, you didn't know that was going to happen, and then something that you have to address, right? And then the other thing that back to this follow-up piece, we would, to encourage attendance, also schedule a follow-up meeting. So what we would do is we would just schedule when the follow-up meeting reminder went out, so that we didn't actually have to send it out on that specific day and time. We would just schedule it, and then it would prompt people to remind them. We read a whole bunch of studies on the efficacy of the prompt and the follow-up, and just showing how much that increased attendance and all of the things. So that was our process. I'm gonna take you through some other specifics, and then I'm gonna step back from this PowerPoint and just, I guess, just look at myself as I present. But then I want to go through some nitty-gritty examples and really use the chat function to ask any of your the questions that have not been answered today about Zoom or online groups and that sort of thing. So we're going to have a little bit more space for the chat function. So some of the fun things that we noticed in providing a lot of online support groups. We had someone, I think, go to the bathroom while they were on a group call. So we didn't know that we had to specify, please don't go to the bathroom while you're on a group call, but that is something group guidelines, just something to be mindful of. So that was, a hilarious experience. When what we also noticed was we did a lot of like toggling and switching between technologies. So I was talking to my colleague Anna. Anna and Heather were co-facilitating quite a few groups, and they had a group that there was a few safety concerns for a few of the participants. And because they didn't want to be co-facilitating and typing on their computer, they found it easier to actually text one another kind of below the screen to be able to communicate. That was their sneaky way of being able to do that. And then, I think just the biggest thing was more around privacy and the online privacy space. Like the roommate example, walking by or hearing people in the background or that sort of thing. And then one other thing we noticed was just be mindful about your wardrobe choices, because you will be side to side with your co-facilitator. That's Kristen and Raylene of our team. They had a pretty good laugh about that. And that's it. So I'm going to stop my share now. And now we can just embrace the chat function here. Okay. So other document. Okay. The group proposal template. Yeah. Okay. So Laura, thank you so much for, Laura messaged me and said, do you want to talk about the group proposal template that we sent out? Absolutely. So we sent you a group, informed consent template, basic thing. We also sent you this group proposal template, which is basically everything in this presentation that sort of needs to be thought through when you're creating a group proposal. So it's pretty much a listed version of everything that we went over in the slides. And so Tina says there has been a debate about kids at home not wanting to deny access to moms without childcare options during COVID, but kids interrupt groups and break confidentiality. Absolutely. There are so many brand new ethical dilemmas in this lovely pandemic, and opportunities to reevaluate how we ethically serve people, because we've never had to do this before. And so I think it's very valid that there is a debate about kids at home, because moms are already being unbelievably oppressed, and so many barriers are put in front of them, and then we're also going to refuse service. So obviously the goal is if we could provide childcare, but there was no childcare. So if there's literally no option for childcare, to me, I think we have to be flexible enough that we can figure out how we can be safe enough in the situation that we're in. And it's not ideal, and it's not how we, would love to be running groups. But maybe if there's and running concurrent groups for children and youth, that's amazing. Amazing. Sheila, genius. Absolutely. So this is why I'm so interested in all of your questions. Another debate that we always had was the camera debate, of saying, it doesn't feel safe when people don't have their cameras on, and we don't know what's happening. And, but then it also doesn't feel safe for the participant to have their camera on. And so whose safety are we honoring? And how can we navigate this without the binary of you're either allowed to have your camera on or you're not? So what we did, and again, it's not perfect. It's just sort of what we did in the moment was just talk through, hey, I don't have my camera on because my kids are in the room, and anytime I have my screen on, my toddler just is like a moth to a flame. And so they explained, like, I'm here, I'm engaged, I just have my camera off for this specific reason. Another participant said, oh yeah, well, I can only access it on my phone, so that's all I have. So that's totally fine. And then sort of the other participants were able to consent to that, you know, if they were okay with that after they heard the kind of explanation for it or the rationale. But none of this is easy, and it's just a whole bunch of ethical dilemmas all the time. And so I guess that's what led us to just being so flexible in what we were running. The other thing that we were flexible with our participants, just, I think I mentioned this actually, is just like we didn't know how long the groups were going to be. And so we really were informed by our participants a lot. So other questions or things that maybe we didn't, shared group agreements, absolutely. Co-creating your group agreements, I think, is absolute best practice. It creates safety, it creates engagement, it helps people take ownership over their group because they are the ones that created the guidelines. Absolutely, shared group agreements and shared group guidelines are huge. Yeah. So other questions, because this is very much, oh, okay, Linda, here we go. Flexibility for sure. We just finished a 23-week group online, and we did go over safeguards and examples of this, so our clients had a plan. Amazing. That's so great. So today's presentation was really about figuring out for you and where you work specifically, what is going to be helpful. And so I guess my question for folks, if you want to share in the chat, is based on this presentation, are you planning on maybe starting up a group at some point? And if so, what are you going to run if you want to share it? This is where we can share our ideas. This is where we can share hesitations or questions. Yeah, so just interested in kind of where people's heads are at after that very broad Group 101 kind of presentation. Just wait for the chat. Okay, so Jen, do you have plans or protocols in place for someone who seems to be in crisis when they leave the group? This seems like something that's a lot easier to address in person, 100%. And so that's actually part of our informed consent process and our planning with the group. When we talk about group guidelines, we talk about what happens when someone gets upset. Worst case scenario, someone gets upset. What should we do? What do you think is going to be the most helpful? And so we're also co-creating the crisis plans so that it's really trauma informed and it's not top down. This is what we're going to do if you're in crisis. It's, hey, this is what we've figured out as a group that we should do. And obviously facilitators will be taking that role of the follow-up. But it's cool to have the group co-create how that goes and what the agreements are. Because, you know, if someone is in crisis and it's seeming like they're at risk, imminent harm, then we need to help people understand that if you go off camera, because I'm a counselor and so I'm charged with making sure everything's okay here. If you look like you're at imminent risk, and then I call you to follow up, if I'm unable to reach you within maybe an hour of you kind of going off, then we need to have a safety plan in place. I need to either be able to, so one of the things we've been talking about a lot is calling police for safety checks, and trying to find different ways of supporting folks, and yet still having a responsibility to have that oversight and that safety. So, so one of the things we talk through with people is like, is there someone in your life who is a safe person, and who is that, and why are they safe? And what would it look like, do you think, if we would call them, if, heaven forbid, you know, a crisis were to happen? And then, you know, trying to find an alternate to calling 911, ideally. But knowing that that would be kind of the worst case scenario. If we couldn't get a hold of you and we really thought you were at imminent risk, that's what we would have to do. So that's usually how I would frame it. Any comments or other suggestions on that would be, you know, very welcome. Okay. Okay, and then Tina says, you said earlier you were going to cover the use of videos. Basically, I expressed that there is an ongoing debate over people being on camera or off camera during a group experience, and how we dealt with it within our groups was we just talked it through and had people articulate why they couldn't be on camera, and then we sussed out and got buy-in and consent from the other group participants to make sure that that felt okay. And then we would reevaluate that as well, kind of each group that, you know, certain people were off camera, we would say, is that okay? How does everyone feel? So that's mainly, Tina, what I was going to refer to. Linda, oh God, yes, Linda. Been thinking about a group for professionals for support due to the pandemic and how we can support and empower. Well, yeah, please send me that link. I will be there. I think that's an amazing idea, Linda, and very needed right now. I think, you know, myself and my team get a lot of that, but I think running a group for that would be awesome. And Jill, my colleague and I are planning an outdoor activity and therapeutic group combo, which will be closed. And we hope to offer an activity. Oh my God, this is my dream. Equestrian assisted learning, golf, a walk and kayaking for the first hour of group, followed up by another hour of check-ins, client-led discussions, checkouts. We are able to offer child minding on site with the, oh, amazing. Jill, that sounds like a dream. If anyone creates a group after this, I would be absolutely honored if you sent me the link for it, because I'm just so excited about what people are sharing here. Okay, Maureen. Yes, I would like to facilitate a group support around my position as a victim services support in downtown East Side without having the official connection to the police that most of my clients are not in balance with. I am just figuring out the logistics and safety plans seem to be a bigger part of that theme. Absolutely. Yeah. I would be very keen to see, you know, if you're able to run that. I think it's very needed. Tina, they may have a previous agreed plan, like calling the neighbor who has agreed to it rather than police. Yes, Tina, absolutely. Great point. Maureen, I will be there, Linda. Yeah. So Anyone else planning on maybe taking this back to your colleagues and potentially, you know, proposing like, hey, this is what I think maybe we could do, and here's why? We'd love to offer a group in our community. However, it's very small and tight-knit, so unsure how we would escape having situations with multiple dual relationships. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and it's interesting too, you know, Myra, I hope I'm saying that correctly. You know, we would love to offer a group in our community. However, it's very small and tight-knit, so unsure. So maybe, you know, Myra, you might be looking more at activities, you know, and sort of lighter, less deep processing. And maybe that creates enough connection, but it's less at risk if there is dual relationships. Who knows? And Bina, for my current groups that I have, I offer accountability partners among themselves to check in with. Ooh, in addition to that's awesome. So Bina, can I ask you a follow-up question? Are the accountability partners the other members of the group, or do the participants have a different accountability partner? Kristen, definitely planning it. We'll be incorporating forest gardening. So good. Irene, I will be sharing this info with my team at Delta Assist. Definitely feeling inspired. Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure, Irene. Nicole, very new to the Stopping the Violence role. I've been using all of this. Previously ran support groups for multi-barrier clients pre-COVID. It's so different during the pandemic. Absolutely. Okay, and Bina got back to me. Either or. Huh, cool. Okay, Vanessa, I have wanted to offer a group for many years, but we have limited capacity. Only one full-time counselor position. Okay. Yeah, I know. Vanessa, that's hard. One full-time counselor position split between two people, and you're doing everything else, I'm assuming. And so it sounds like potentially, Vanessa, if you were ever able to offer a group, you would probably have to decrease your current capacity to be able to make that fit in somewhere. Oh, okay, Bina, that's good to know. You get the accountability partner if it's outside of the group, the contact info. Arts and crafts group, so good. Awesome. And you know, I've heard about, and I don't know how doable this is for folks out there, but I've heard about arts and crafts groups where a little package of supplies gets sent out to the person at their home, and then you have it over Zoom and everyone has their own stuff. And obviously that's cost prohibitive for some agencies, but okay. And Jill, our community is 16.5 hours, and I'm the only counselor. Interesting. Slightly below client capacity. Yeah, I mean, it's the other thing that my team and I always talk about is everything in life is trial and error. We're just like, let's just do a pilot group and see how that goes. And maybe we find out it's not sustainable at all and we never do it again, right? But trying things can be a way of kind of figuring out what works. Okay, and Tina's responding to Vanessa, given current resources being online from other communities, even though you can't run a group, you may be able to connect to STV groups. And oh, yes, because everyone's online all the time now. Absolutely. So if you're in a small community, maybe you can connect to other community groups. Absolutely. Emma, I've been trying to find enough women to do a group around the book Love Hurts. Just can't seem to get enough women to commit to participating. They're all so over the place. Yep. My other hang up is that I'm a brand new Stopping the Violence wellness worker counselor, and I've never led a support group before. I would love to have a peer to co-facilitate, especially if this peer had experience. Our organization is so small that I'm the only Stopping the Violence counselor, and I'm also the outreach worker. I fill 2 positions, which is a full-time gig. Emma, I don't think you're alone out there, but that's a lot to handle. So I'm wondering for Stopping the Violence counselors who are a little bit more isolated, I wonder if there's anything, that Eva BC can support you with, or connections that you can make to potentially run groups with other Stopping the Violence counselors, maybe, I don't know. But it looks like capacity is an issue. Yeah. Michelle, reimagining justice and what happens when survivors experience a lack of justice through their interactions with the criminal legal system and are looking to reimagine what justice actually is. Oh, that's amazing. It was for survivors of sexual assault who felt failed by systems. I'm sure there's a lot out there. And it was a pilot group, ended the week before lockdown, and you'd love to offer it virtually. Needs to be redesigned. Yeah. I think the thing too is, Michelle, and to everyone struggling with capacity, I was talking to, so some of my colleagues work part-time at Peak and part-time other places. And so talking to them about working at another agency where, they get a salary, they get benefits, but they get a lot of pressure to do a lot. And they don't know kind of what's okay to say, no, I actually can't handle this. And when, and then, after she talked it through with me about, well, maybe I could just ask my manager to just decrease my client work, and what am I afraid of, and that sort of thing. I think one of the things, we talk about as a team at Peak is just, we have so much pressure to see all the people, and we have capitalist pressure to be able to, make it in Vancouver, which is an insanely expensive city. So we kind of want to be seeing clients for that. But when do we need to say uncle, and when do we need to ask for help, and how can we approach either management or whoever your support or whoever your funders are, whatever, to say, hey, something's got to shift here, because I remember saying this at the beginning, and I'm sure a lot of you remember this as well. I remember hearing and saying, got to focus on sustainability. And now that we're in year 2 of this, I think I have a newfound understanding of what that actually means. I'm hoping that management has a newfound understanding of what that means. And so hopefully, if you don't have capacity right now to run a group, I am really crossing my fingers that you can advocate for yourself to hopefully get more capacity. I know that's a loaded topic, and very easier said than done. Emma, great question. What's the minimum amount of group of people to run a group? We would do, I think we did one with 2, but we checked in with the people to see if they wanted it, and they were really gung-ho, so we did it. But I think minimum for us is at least 3. Ideally, we like to have about 6 to make it kind of worth the effort and to have a diversity of perspective and experiences. But yeah, I would say 3 or 4 is a great kind of minimum amount. Yeah, I'm just echoing everything, Michelle. It sounds amazing. And Irene potentially partnering up. Oh man, this chat, it's getting messy. Oh, I'm just reading through. Fort St. James, BC. Nice. Okay. And Mandy's stopping the outreach, stopping the violence. Wow. Okay, Laura, thank you for that. So stopping the violence counselors can connect on the listserv. So I'm wondering, maybe Laura, if needed, maybe everyone already knows how to do that, but maybe you can send out, you know, an email or something just with a link on for folks. Now, Sarah, with some of the groups that we delivered, we partnered with other service providers in the community to have another co-facilitator. VHA, Indigenous groups, friends, awesome. Stopping the violence counselors, partnering with mental health counselors. Cool. And Michelle, the group was honestly incredible. It was one of the most impactful experiences I've been part of my work. Much needed space for, oh. Michelle, you articulated how impactful it was for you. And I think that is the missing piece of this presentation, is our work doing individual counseling can be so isolating to us, and we can often only see the pain and not as much of the cool connections and light bulb moments. And I'm just saying that groups can be just as restorative and transformative for us as therapists as they are for our clients. And I think that as a, you know, someone who practices counseling from an intersectional feminist lens, that's absolutely the perspective I take, is, hey, we're both changing here. I'm being changed by you, you're being changed by me. You know, there absolutely is a power dynamic here, but we're going to try and work on decreasing that as much as possible. So thanks so much, Michelle, for sharing that. And Emma's going to reach out. Awesome. Nicole, facilitating with a counselor from another agency as well. Sweet. This is so good. Yeah, partnering, Debbie, exactly. Partnering with services anywhere in the province. And this, you know, this is where the pandemic can actually fast track and accelerate the mental health industry. And maybe even, you know, there's a lot of stuff that the pandemic is amplifying and worsening and making horrific, such as domestic violence. But hopefully, now that we're not barriered by our physical location, maybe, you know, really reaching out to other people in other provinces, other parts of the province, will lead to us sharing knowledge better and more. Haley's working through emergency sexual assault grants. Definitely would be interested in partnering with others. Okay. Haley's up for it. Nicely. Okay. I'm wondering too, so it sounds like, based on what Laura said, Haley, maybe reaching out on the listserv. Tina, Laura, is there a way Eva BC could host a WLH group online for women in smaller communities? Laura, do you want to jump in and speak to this question from Tina?
Which question
The
is that?
question is there a way Eva BC could host what is WLH? What's that acronym?
That's a question for Tina.
I don't know, Tina, what
Oh, when love hurts. My response to that question was when I put in the chat that we're about to hold another Zoom check-in for STD counselors.
Oh, perfect.
And so we could debrief this webinar and, you know, talk about suggestions like that.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so I'm just mindful of the time. And so it sounds like, so Laura, Do you know yet when that Zoom check-in is, or that just watch the listserv for information?
We have set dates. I don't know them off the top of my head without referring to my day timer.
All good. All good.
But they're coming up in the next month. And there will also be, I see someone's asking if victim services would have access to that information. Victim services will also have their own check-in, as will outreach.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So thank you for sharing, all of the things that you're already doing and what you're planning on doing and all of that. And now my question is, are there leftover burning questions, in running groups online, or anything that we haven't touched on today that is coming up for people? I'm going to give a little bit of time if you want to bring any extra questions into the chat. I think while we're waiting to see if anyone has any extra questions, is Fiona still there? Fiona, can we maybe put up that poll again? The same poll that we did at the very beginning. I don't know if you have access. I'm putting Fiona on the spot. Sorry, Fiona. You don't have to do it. You're probably doing 17 other things. But basically, I'm hoping that today's conversation and presentation helps people to understand you don't have to have it perfect. You just have to talk to your community, figure out what the biggest needs are, figure out what the capacity is, and just try and, do one thing, see how it goes. We're all about trial and error at Peak. And so that's my hope, is to have sort of an energy of curiosity and hope. And yeah. So Michelle asks, are the tech issues typically manageable? Oh, God. I don't know. I mean, that's a loaded question. Tech issues, yes, absolutely. They're typically manageable. And actually, what I could do is, sorry, folks, I'll just quickly try and share my correct screen for you, because we actually came up with our admin team. Bear with me, sharing my screen. Our admin team came up with a Zoom guideline, because we use Zoom. Not everyone uses Zoom. So basically this was the online support guide that my lovely admin manager created. So she just created all of the, instructions, talking about participants renaming themselves, and if they want to remain anonymous, not using their personal Zoom account. So we have some of these things, and I can absolutely share this, Laura, as part of it. So honestly, though, tech is usually manageable, but that's why I try to have admin support, so that it's not just on the counselors to do everything clinically and everything tech-wise. And then if you do have, maybe it's just 2 co-facilitators, if you don't have a ton of admin support, have one co-facilitator be in charge of the tech stuff for a group, and the other one is in charge of facilitating and clinical. And then you can switch, obviously, if you want, but it's good to, if there is tech hiccups. So for example, it's 5 minutes into the group and only 2 people are there. Now what? So now we're going to be emailing people and connecting with people, seeing if they're coming, seeing if they have the right link, all of that. So ideally it's, one person does that while the other person maintains the group. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with these. Okay, yes, Emma, I'll send it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, so for tech issues, what we usually do is I'll send this out. I will absolutely. I wonder if I can share it in the chat, but I'll send it out regardless back to Laura, and she can make sure that it gets to everyone. But I gotta say that with whatever tech platform you're using, leverage their support. So it's like, okay, I'm paying $20 a month for this professional Zoom or whatever. I'm paying a lot of money. And so I am going to get them to walk me through it. And if they can't walk me through it, I'm getting a manager to walk me through it. And really, yeah. And then Jamie, absolutely do a tech dry run. That's such a great idea. And that's a really good idea to, yeah, exactly. So they're not as anxious the first group. That's brilliant. And yes, be transparent with minor hiccups and with your humanity, because that's what it means to be a human. And the more kind of closed off and professional we are, in my experience, the less trauma informed we are. So, yeah, okay, Maureen, thank you. And I think honestly, if there's no other questions, what I'll do is I'll make sure I can get this Zoom guide to Laura, and maybe we can end a little bit early if everyone's done. Oh no, good. Okay, here we go. Oh, and we've got a survey. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, it's a really short evaluation. It's online. It's really helpful to us, and it'd be really helpful to Jennifer to get the feedback. I already know you're going to give her a lot of love. This was fantastic, Jennifer.
Oh,
It's extremely helpful. I have an email list of everyone that registered, so I can send out the Zoom guide when I get it from Jennifer. And I really can't thank you enough. And thank you everybody for attending today. And this, as I mentioned, will be, it's been recorded, and at some point it will be uploaded to our website.